Overnight, I staged a stroke and watched my entire world unravel. My son, the accomplished cardiologist, claimed a medical conference left him no time to come. My daughter explained that her husband refused to invite that kind of stress into their home. But my youngest child, working exhausting night shifts as a nurse and barely scraping by each month, opened her door to me without a second thought. She even sold her car to cover my rehabilitation costs. And when my attorney finally stepped inside and revealed the truth, the expressions on their faces burned into my memory in a way I will never forget. I'm genuinely thankful you're here with me. Before we go any further, take a second to share in the comments where you're watching from. Your words matter more than you realize. I read far more of them than you'd expect. And one quick clarification before the story unfolds: certain details have been dramatized for narrative and educational purposes. Any similarities to actual individuals or locations are purely coincidental, though the heart of this story is entirely authentic. That November evening, the stillness inside my lake house felt almost suffocating. It wasn't the gentle, reflective quiet of retirement. It was the empty kind, the kind that echoes with the absence of people who should have been there. I stood by the window facing Lake Tahoe, watching the final streaks of sunlight disappear behind the Sierra Nevada. 64 years of relentless effort, and this breathtaking panorama was my trophy. Grace, my wife, would have treasured that sunset. She used to tell me the true reward of success wasn't wealth or applause. It was having someone beside you to admire the view. She'd been gone for 8 years, yet some nights I still caught myself turning to share a story, forgetting for a fleeting second that her chair would remain unoccupied. I'm Walter Brennan. I grew Brennan Medical Supply from a modest warehouse in Sacramento into a $93 million enterprise. More than 2,000 employees across 12 states depended on the company I built. By every conventional standard of achievement, I had won. Yet standing alone in a home spacious enough for a family that rarely crossed its threshold, I realized a truth no balance sheet could capture. Financially, I had more than enough. Emotionally, I was running on empty. At 6:47 p.m., the phone shattered the silence. It was my oldest son, Michael, the one whose path through Johns Hopkins Medical School I financed to the tune of $400,000. He had become a cardiologist, accomplished, admired, the embodiment of every father's ambition for his child. "Dad, good, I was hoping to catch you." His tone was sharp and businesslike, the kind of voice a man uses when squeezing a call between more pressing priorities. "I need to run something by you." For a split second, hope stirred in my chest. Maybe he was thinking about coming home. Maybe he simply wanted to hear my voice. "There's a medical tech startup seeking investors, advanced cardiac monitoring systems. If I move quickly, I can secure my stake, but I'll need 300,000. 300,000. How have you been? Now I've been thinking about you. Just a figure, clean and impersonal." "That's a substantial amount, Michael. Tell me about the company." He shifted into a pitch that sounded carefully practiced, dense with forecasts and market potential, painfully thin on anything human. Before he even finished, I already knew my answer, but I asked the question anyway. "Will you come for Thanksgiving next week? We could sit down and talk this through in person." Silence lingered. I could almost hear him flipping through obligations in his mind. "That might be difficult, Dad. There's a cardiology conference in Miami that weekend. I really do need a decision soon, though. Could you just transfer the funds?" I told him I'd consider it. We ended the call politely, like strangers who had exhausted their script. 40 minutes later, my phone rang again. Victoria. I had spent $350,000 on her Yale law degree. Now she was a corporate attorney in Manhattan, married to a hedge fund executive, living high above the Upper East Side in a glass-walled penthouse. "Hi, Daddy." Her voice carried that unmistakable brightness, the kind reserved for negotiations disguised as affection. "There's something I want to talk to you about." I said nothing, letting her continue. "Richard and I found a vacation home in the Hamptons. It would be ideal for hosting clients. I just need $250,000 for the down payment." $250,000. Another figure. Another conversation reduced to a transaction. My daughter had called for money, not for me. "Victoria, that's a significant amount. Why don't you come out and visit? We can sit down and talk it through properly." Maybe after the holidays, Daddy. Things are hectic at the firm right now. But could you let me know about the Hamptons place soon? I'll think about it, I replied quietly, and the line went dead. I remained there in the dim stillness of the lake house. Long after the call ended, 2 children, 2 financial requests, 2 unmistakable reminders that at some point I had stopped being their father and started being their funding source. The third call came at 8:15 p.m. Dad? Hi. I hope I'm not calling too late. It was Sarah, my youngest, the one who had startled everyone by choosing nursing school over the high-powered careers her brother and sister pursued. Her education had cost $45,000, barely a fraction of what I'd invested in the others. She worked overnight shifts at a county hospital in Reno and shared a modest apartment with her husband David, a high school history teacher. There was something in her voice her siblings lacked: warmth, sincerity. Sarah, it's wonderful to hear from you. How are things? I'm good, Dad. Honestly, really good. David and I have been talking about a few things. Nothing bad, just life. I realized we hadn't spoken in a while, and I wanted to check in. How are you feeling? Are you eating properly? Are you keeping up with your blood pressure medication? She wasn't building toward a request. She wasn't circling an investment opportunity. She was asking about me. I struggled to recall the last time one of my children had phoned simply to see how I was doing. Not Michael, not Victoria, but Sarah, the one I had quietly feared might be settling for less, was giving me something none of the others had offered in years. Her attention, her authentic concern, love without a price tag. We talked for nearly 30 minutes about her patients, about David's latest history lesson, about the stray cat they'd recently taken in. Nothing monumental, nothing urgent, and yet somehow it was everything that truly mattered. After we said goodbye, something settled firmly inside me. An idea that had been lingering quietly in the back of my thoughts, finally sharpened into certainty. I reached for my phone and dialed the one person who had stood beside me longer than anyone else. My attorney and closest friend of 35 years, Robert Ashford. Robert, it's Walter. I need a favor, and it's not a simple one. He listened without interrupting as I laid out my plan. When I finished, his first response was resistance. Walter, you're 64. You're seriously considering staging a medical emergency and convincing everyone you've lost your fortune. Do you fully grasp what could go wrong? I do, I answered evenly. That's exactly why I need you to make sure it's handled carefully. For the next 3 hours we mapped it out in meticulous detail. A discreet medical team on standby. Security positioned far enough away to remain unseen. A convincing explanation involving a stroke that impaired my cognition. Reckless financial decisions made while mentally compromised. A trusted advisor exploiting my vulnerability. In the story we built, I would be a man undone, health failing, wealth evaporated within weeks. Before we ended the call, Robert extracted a promise. If anything began to feel genuinely unsafe, I was to contact him immediately. I will, I said. We both understood that I likely wouldn't. The preparation took 2 weeks. The first step was appearance. I stopped maintaining myself the way money makes effortless. I let my hair grow wild and uneven. I abandoned my razor. I replaced tailored suits with ill-fitting clothes from a thrift shop in Carson City. Garments that sagged at the shoulders and hinted at quiet deterioration. Then came the more difficult task, making the story believable. Robert and I refined every detail. A stroke 3 weeks earlier, leaving subtle cognitive damage, confusion that led to disastrous investment choices. A financial advisor who capitalized on my impaired judgment. Piece by piece, we constructed the fall of Walter Brennan. The lake house refinanced beyond reason. My company shares liquidated at a steep loss. Investment accounts emptied. Every detail of the collapse was crafted to feel authentic, because it was the kind of tragedy that unfolds every single day. An older man suffers a medical episode, makes compromised decisions, and watches a lifetime vanish. Why would my children question a story they'd heard 100 times before? The most difficult moment came when I faced my reflection. The man in the mirror appeared a decade older, worn down and uncertain. There was a rawness in his eyes that wasn't entirely performance. Standing there in second-hand clothes, preparing to measure the depth of my children's love, I felt a genuine knot of fear tightening in my chest. What if none of them showed up? What if this experiment confirmed that to them, I was nothing more than a bank account with a pulse? I forced the doubt aside and made the first call. Michael, I need to come see you. Something's gone wrong. My voice shook, and this time, the tremor wasn't completely rehearsed. I told him about the stroke, about the reckless financial decisions made while I wasn't thinking clearly, about the devastation that followed. I said I just needed support for a little while, somewhere to land until I could sort through the wreckage. The silence on the other end stretched uncomfortably long. Dad, that's a lot to take in. When did this happen? 3 weeks ago. I didn't want to alarm you, but I've lost the house, Michael. Most of it is gone. I just need a place to stay for a few days. Just until I figure out my next steps. Another pause followed, heavier this time, stretching long enough for me to feel its weight. Dad, I'm flying out to Miami for that conference tomorrow morning. Stephanie and I have had this scheduled for months. I can't just drop everything. I'm not asking you to, I replied quietly. I just need somewhere to stay. A couch would be fine. Anything. I heard him breathe out slowly, not the sigh of concern, but the measured exhale of someone assessing disruption, not distress. I could almost picture him calculating logistics instead of empathy. Look, Dad, this really isn't ideal. Stephanie's parents are with us all week. The house is full. There's just no space right now. But let me see if I can work something out. Can I call you back? He didn't. 3 days later, I found myself standing in front of Michael's home in suburban San Diego. The estate stretched across 2 acres of flawless landscaping. I had paid for that house, given it to him as a gift when he completed his residency. The fountain in the circular driveway, the one that cost $60,000, had come from my account as well. I pressed the doorbell. Inside I could hear voices, laughter, the warm hum of a family gathered together. When Michael opened the door, I watched his expression shift. Recognition, then surprise, and finally something disturbingly close to irritation. Dad, what are you doing here? I called you 3 days ago. You never returned it. I've been sleeping in my car, Michael. I don't have anywhere else. Over his shoulder I saw Stephanie walking toward us. The same woman I had welcomed into our family with a $200,000 wedding gift, looked at me as though I were a salesman who had knocked at the wrong time. Walter, she said coolly, we weren't expecting you. Michael stepped outside, easing the door mostly shut behind him, cutting off the view, cutting off access. Dad, I'm really sorry about everything, but this just isn't a good moment. Stephanie's parents are visiting. We're hosting a dinner tomorrow night. The house is full. I don't need a guest room, I said. Just a couch. One night. I'm your father. He dragged a hand across the back of his neck, the universal signal of inconvenience. Let me give you some cash, he offered. There's a decent hotel about 10 miles from here, he added. You can stay there tonight. We'll sort things out after the conference. He went back inside and came out moments later with a small stack of cash. Without meeting my eyes, he pushed it into my palm. $150. Dad, I really am sorry. The timing just couldn't be worse. We'll talk after Miami, okay? The door shut. I heard the deadbolt slide into place. A second later, the laughter inside resumed as if nothing had interrupted it. I stood there on the porch of the home I had paid for, clutching $150, finally understanding the real price of everything I thought I had given. The flight to New York felt surreal, like traveling between different worlds. In my worn thrift store clothes, I caught lingering stares from other passengers. A woman seated in first class subtly recoiled as I walked past. The flight attendant addressed me with exaggerated patience, the tone reserved for those quietly judged as lesser. Victoria's building towered 42 stories above Central Park. I had contributed $400,000 toward its purchase as a wedding gift to her and Richard. The doorman stopped me before I could step inside. Can I help you, sir? I'm here to see Victoria Brennan. Victoria Harrison. I'm her father. His expression made it clear he doubted that claim. He placed a call, speaking in low tones, then faced me again with restrained contempt. Mrs. Harrison isn't available. She suggests you contact her office to schedule an appointment. Please, I said, just 5 minutes. Tell her it's urgent. Tell her I've lost everything. He made another call, murmuring quietly. This time, when he looked at me, his face carried something closer to reluctant sympathy. She says you may come up. Apartment 4214. The elevator ascended without a sound. The corridor upstairs was lined with carpeting so thick it muted every step. Victoria opened the door before I had the chance to knock. And for the first time in years, I truly looked at my daughter. She wore a silk blouse that likely cost more than Sarah's entire month of rent. Her hair fell flawlessly into place, her makeup immaculate, every detail about her projected polish and prosperity. Yet when her eyes met mine, there was a chill there I hadn't expected. "Daddy," she said, but the word sounded unfamiliar on her tongue, like something she hadn't spoken in years. "What happened to you?" I told her everything. The stroke, the reckless investments, the collapse of my finances. I said I only needed temporary help, a place to stay for a short while. Just enough time to piece together something from what felt like ashes. She listened with her arms folded tightly across her chest. When I finished, she didn't step forward. She didn't reach for me. She didn't ask me inside. "Daddy, this is I need to discuss it with Richard. I just need a couch, Victoria. A few days, I'm your father." She glanced over her shoulder. Richard stood in the kitchen watching. His expression left no room for interpretation. "Daddy, Richard doesn't think it's appropriate for you to stay here. We have our routines, our space. This would be disruptive. Disruptive. I had become an inconvenience in my own child's life. "Let me get you some money," she added, repeating her brother's solution. "There are shelters downtown that can help you get back on your feet." She returned holding an envelope. Inside were 10 crisp $100 bills. $1,000. "This should help," she said. "I know it's not a lot, but Richard and I are putting money aside for the Hamptons house. You understand?" I looked at her, at the woman I had raised, educated, supported without hesitation, and I understood perfectly. I had invested $750,000 into her future, and when I needed her, she valued me at $1,000 and directions to a shelter. "Goodbye, Daddy," she said gently. "Next time, please call before coming by." The door shut. The lock turned. I stood alone in the hallway of a building I had helped finance, holding an envelope from a daughter who had chosen comfort over compassion. The bus ride to Reno lasted 11 hours. I sat near the back, blending into a crowd of people who, like me, had limited choices. An elderly man across the aisle offered half his sandwich without hesitation. A young mother traveling with 2 small children gave me a warm smile. In those 11 hours, strangers treated me with more kindness than my 2 oldest children had managed all week. Sarah's apartment building was simple. A 3-story walk-up in a working-class neighborhood. The paint peeled in places. The stairwell groaned under each step. But when she opened the door, I saw something I hadn't seen in far too long. I saw love. "Dad." Her expression moved from confusion to shock to fierce concern in seconds. "Oh my God. What happened? Are you okay? Did someone hurt you?" She didn't question why I was there. She didn't glance nervously down the hallway or toward the neighbors' doors. She didn't pause to measure the disruption. She didn't weigh the cost. She just stepped forward and wrapped her arms around me. "Come in," she said urgently. "Right now, you're freezing." The apartment was modest. A small living area, a narrow kitchen, 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom. The furniture had clearly lived another life before this one. The decor was simple, but the walls were covered in photographs, family snapshots, candid smiles, ordinary moments preserved because they meant something. Sarah led me to a sagging couch that somehow felt more welcoming than any custom piece in my lake house ever had. "Dad, sit. Please, tell me what happened." And so I told her. The same story. The stroke, the disastrous decisions, the money is gone. I told her about the stroke, the reckless investments, the collapse of everything I had built. I admitted I had nowhere left to turn, that I'd been sleeping in my car, that my own children had closed their doors to me. Tears streamed down Sarah's face as she listened. When I finished, she didn't deliberate, not even for a breath. "You're staying here," she said firmly. "You're staying with us." "Sarah, I can't impose like that." "You're not imposing. You're my father." She was already pulling blankets from the closet. "David and I will take the couch. You'll sleep in our bed. I won't let you give up your bed. You're not letting us. I'm telling you how it's going to be." She looked at me with steady conviction. Your family. This is what family does. An hour later, David came through the door, papers tucked under his arm, fatigue written across his face after a long day at school. But the moment Sarah explained, there was no hesitation in him. Mr. Brennan, you're welcome here for as long as you need, he said, gripping my hand with quiet strength. Whatever this is, we'll face it together. That night, I lay in their bed, and for the first time in weeks, something shifted inside me. It wasn't comfort that kept me awake. It was something unfamiliar after so much disappointment, something that felt almost like hope. Sleep wouldn't come, not because the mattress was strange, but because of the soft conversation drifting from the kitchen. Sarah and David thought I had already fallen asleep. Their voices were low, but the apartment walls were thin. Every word reached me. David, we have to figure out the finances. I know, he replied, exhausted in his tone. I've been running the numbers. Dad's going to need tests, neurology appointments, therapy, ongoing care. Our insurance won't cover him, and he says there's nothing left. Silence lingered between them. Then David spoke gently. What about your car? I've already thought about it, Sarah replied softly. The Civic might bring in $8,000. It's not a fortune, but it would handle the first round of evaluations and maybe a few months of therapy. Sarah, that's your only transportation, David said. I can take the bus, or ride in with Melissa from the ER. We'll make it work. She hesitated, and when she spoke again, emotion thickened her voice. He went to Michael. He went to Victoria. They both sent him away. Our father showed up hurting and humiliated, and they chose dinner parties and beach houses instead of him, both of them. David let out a slow breath. What do they really have then? Sarah whispered. All that money, all those titles, and they can't make space in their lives for the man who built theirs. What was the point of any of it if this is who they've become? It wasn't worth anything, David said quietly. Not if it cost them that. I'll call the dealership in the morning, Sarah continued. I'll get the best offer I can. Dad needs us. That's what matters. Lying there in the dark, I felt tears slide silently down my face. My youngest child, the one I had invested the least in, the one whose simpler path had once worried me, was ready to sell her only car for a father she believed had nothing left. I had poured nearly $1 million into Michael and Victoria's futures. In return, I received locked doors and polite directions to shelters. I had spent $45,000 on Sarah's education. She was offering me her entire world. By morning, my mind was clear. The experiment had given me all the answers I needed. Before Sarah stirred awake, I stepped quietly outside and called Robert. It's time, I told him. Send the car. At exactly 9 o'clock, a black Mercedes rolled to a stop in front of Sarah's apartment building. Curtains twitched. Neighbors gathered at their windows, staring at the unfamiliar symbol of wealth parked along their modest street. Robert stepped out first. Behind him came his associate and 2 security personnel. In his hand was a leather briefcase, the kind that carries consequences. Inside were documents that would rewrite everything. Sarah opened the door dressed in her scrubs, ready for another hospital shift. She looked from Robert to the guards, then to me. Confusion clouded her face. Dad, what's happening? Call David, I said quietly. We all need to sit down. 20 minutes later, Sarah and David were seated side by side on their worn sofa. I stood in front of them. Robert remained near the door, briefcase at his side. Everything I told you, I began, was untrue. The color drained from Sarah's face. What? I never had a stroke. I didn't lose my money. Brennan Medical Supply is valued at $93 million, and I still own every share. I orchestrated all of this. She stared at me as though the words were foreign. David's confusion slowly gave way to realization. A test? Sarah whispered. You tested us. I tested all 3 of you, I replied. I went to Michael first. I stood on the porch of the house I bought for him and told him I had nothing left and needed help. He handed me $150 and shut the door because his in-laws were staying over and he had a dinner engagement, I said quietly. Sarah's hands were shaking now. Then I went to Victoria, I continued. I stood in the lobby of the building I helped pay for and told her the same story. She gave me $1,000 and suggested I look into a homeless shelter. David slipped his arm around Sarah, as silent tears slid down her cheeks. But you, I said, my voice unsteady. You didn't hesitate. You didn't weigh the inconvenience. You saw your father hurting and chose love. You gave up your bed. You were ready to sell your car to cover medical bills. Sarah looked at me through tear-filled eyes. Dad, why would you do this? Because I had to know, I answered. I needed to know whether I had raised children who understood what family truly means. I needed to know whether everything I built meant more than numbers on paper. I needed to know if anyone would still love me when I had nothing left to offer. Robert stepped forward and opened his briefcase. The documents here outline a restructuring of your father's estate, he said, his tone formal but gentle. The majority of his holdings, $63 million, will be placed into a trust for Sarah and her family. This includes full ownership of Brennan Medical Supply. Sarah gasped softly. What? Michael and Victoria will each receive $10 million, Robert continued. However, their inheritances are conditional. They must complete 100 hours of community service with homeless and elderly communities. They must attend 1 year of mandatory family therapy, and they must provide a sincere written apology, not to your father, but to you, Sarah, for how they treated him when they believed he had nothing. Sarah shook her head through tears. Dad, I don't want their money. I don't need millions. I just wanted you safe. I know, I said gently. That's exactly why it belongs to you. I crossed the small room and knelt in front of her, taking her trembling hands in mine. You remembered something your brother and sister forgot, I told her. You understood that wealth isn't counted in properties or portfolios. It's measured in love, in sacrifice, in showing up when it costs you something. Sarah collapsed into my arms, sobbing. There's something else you need to know, I said softly. Last night I heard you and David talking. I heard you are planning to sell your car. I heard what you said about Michael and Victoria, and I heard the question that mattered most. I looked directly into her tear-filled eyes. What does any of it mean if this is who they became? It meant nothing, Sarah, I said quietly. Every dollar I poured into them, none of it mattered, but the $45,000 I spent on your nursing education, that shaped you. It taught you compassion. It taught you that every human being has worth. That was the finest investment I ever made. Robert cleared his throat gently. There's one additional matter. He reached into the briefcase and removed a set of keys. Mr. Brennan has purchased a home here in this neighborhood. 4 bedrooms, a yard, space to grow. The deed is in your name. It's fully paid. Sarah stared at the keys as though they might vanish. A house. You earned it, I told her. Not because of titles or promotions or status. You earned it by being who you are, by choosing love when it would have been easier to choose comfort, by giving everything you had to someone you believed had nothing. David stood and gripped my hand, his eyes bright. Thank you, Mr. Brennan. We don't even have words. Then promise me something, I replied. Help me show Michael and Victoria what you already understand. Help me teach them that family isn't about what you can take from someone. It's about what you're willing to give. 3 years later, I sat at Sarah's dining table on Thanksgiving. The house I gave them had become the heart of our family. Its walls were lined with photographs, moments captured, memories preserved, love made visible. The kitchen carries the scent of roasted turkey and something deeper. Gratitude earned the hard way. Children's laughter echoes down the hallway. Sarah's 2-year-old daughter, Emily, darts between rooms with her cousin Michael Jr., chasing after her, their giggles filling every corner of the house. Michael is different now. Therapy reshaped him. The hours he spent serving in shelters and senior centers humbled him. He's softer, more aware. At dinner, his phone stays out of sight. When someone speaks, he truly listens. Victoria stands beside Sarah at the stove, sleeves rolled up, helping without being asked. The sharp corporate polish she once wore like armor has faded. She volunteers at a legal aid clinic these days, guiding elderly clients through cases of financial abuse. After a year of therapy, she admitted to me that somewhere along the way she had become the very kind of person she once judged harshly. David slices the turkey while I sit with Emily perched on my knee. She calls me Papa Walter and insists on hearing stories about when you were a venture. her toddler mind still untangling the word entrepreneur. The dining room is noisy, crowded, imperfect, and more beautiful than any lakefront sunset I ever owned. Before we begin the meal, Michael rises from his chair. He does this every Thanksgiving now. I need to say something, he starts, emotion tightening his voice. 3 years ago, Dad stood at my front door. He told me he had lost everything, and I shut him out because I had guests coming over. I handed him $150 and sent him away so my plans wouldn't be disrupted. The room grows still. Only the soft crinkle of Emily playing with a napkin breaks the silence. For 3 years, Michael continues, I've tried to understand how I became that man, how I could look at my own father in pain and see inconvenience instead of responsibility. And I finally understand it happened because I forgot what Dad tried to teach us. That success means nothing if you sacrifice your humanity to get there. Victoria wipes at her eyes and nods. But Sarah, Michael says, turning toward his youngest sister, never forgot. When Dad showed up at her door with nothing, she gave him everything. Not because she had more resources than Victoria and me, but because she remembered what we had lost. She remembered that family showed up. Family sacrifices. Family means loving without conditions, Michael finishes. He lifts his glass to Sarah, to me, to redemption, and second chances. We follow his lead. Emily bangs her cup on the table and loudly insists on juice instead. The solemnity breaks into laughter, conversation overlapping, chairs scraping, the joyful disorder of a family that has finally learned how to be one. Later that night, after plates are washed and little ones tucked into bed, I sit out on Sarah's porch. The Nevada desert sky stretches wide above us, stars slowly piercing the darkness. She steps outside carrying 2 mugs of tea and hands one to me. Do you ever wish you hadn't done it? She asks quietly. The test? I take my time before answering. I hate that it had to happen, I admit. I hate that I raised children who needed a wake-up call to remember their values, but I don't regret discovering the truth. And I don't regret the family we became afterward. She rests her head against my shoulder like she used to when she was a little girl. Michael's not the same anymore, she says. Not really, Victoria either. They've changed. They have. I agree. It took something painful to open their eyes, but they chose to learn from it. Not everyone does. We sit quietly, watching constellations settle over the horizon. Dad, Sarah says after a while, I never wanted the money. You know that, right? I would have sold the car. I took extra shifts, done whatever it took. I know, I tell her. That's exactly why you were entrusted with it. Because you would have given everything without being asked. Because you understand that real wealth isn't measured by what you gather. It's measured by what you're willing to give. She squeezes my hand gently. From inside the house, Michael and Victoria's laughter drifts out into the night. David is playing a quiet song on his guitar. Emily murmurs in her sleep, This is what $93 million could never buy. This is family. This is love. This is what remains when everything else is stripped away. My name is Walter Brennan. I built an empire worth $93 million. And I nearly lost 3 children because I failed to teach them what that money was actually for. It wasn't until I stood in my daughter's doorway pretending to have nothing that I finally understood what I should have known all along. Real wealth isn't measured in portfolios, properties, or account balances. It's measured in the people who would hand you their last dollar when they believe you have none. It's measured in the arms that hold you when you're at your lowest. It's measured in children who, when faced with the truth, choose growth over bitterness. If this story moved you, I ask 3 simple things. Share your own story of family, forgiveness, or second chances in the comments. Pass this message along to someone who may need the reminder. And subscribe to A Father's Wrath for more powerful stories about grace, redemption, and the quiet resolve of fathers who refuse to give up on their children. Because sometimes the greatest thing a father can do is strip away what glitters, so his family can finally see what's gold.